Good evening, YouTube. This is Tyre Metalhead Weatherman. Hopefully, you guys have had a good weekend so far. Mentioned in yesterday's video that we were going to be doing a tropical outlook because we haven't in a while since Ian went through. So, just going to go ahead and jump right into that here. And already we have two other disturbances out here right now. This one I'm watching a little bit more closely than this one over here. This one has a higher chance of development, but we know what tends to happen with these storms that are pretty much around this line here. The second they start to develop, they get kicked out to the north and west, out to sea, and they're never to be seen or heard about again after that. But this one right here, this looks eerily familiar. It's a lot like Fiona and Ian. I hate to say that. And if we look on the 5-day trek here, I want you to take a look at where this thing is forecasted to head. The key with these storms here is, and here's proof of my analysis. You see this storm, it has a higher chance of developing, but the second it does, look where it's going, right here. Maybe the Azores might get affected by this. Maybe Cabo Verde might get affected by this as well, but this won't be a threat to the mainland U.S. or the greater or lesser Antilles region. This, however, it's a low chance of developing, but storms like Fiona and Ian took a little bit longer to develop. Are we going to call this an Ian or Fiona 2.0? No, because there's a lot of uncertainty. This is extremely far out, and it's a low chance of formation. So, truthfully, it's hard to say what's going to happen with this. There's also a few other things that may very well inhibit it in the short range as well. So this may not even form. But this is definitely something that we need to watch, because once it gets around this region, the only place it could end up is inland. And this area is still very much conducive to tropical development for right now. So there's still a lot of uncertainty, but we're not done yet. Hurricane season lasts until November 30th. So we're going to have to keep watching this stuff. We're going to go ahead and go to the models. We're going to start out with the GFS ensemble. Oh, wow. How do we get this 60 hours back? I meant to be right here. That was weird. All right. Here we are. It's current time. This is tropical wave number 1 right here that's closer to the Caribbean. This is tropical wave number 2 that's just south of Cabo Verde. And this is basically a ensemble member mean. This doesn't necessarily, these little red numbers are indicative of probabilities of low pressure being in a certain area. And the more numbers you have within a smaller area, the higher probability of a low pressure center being there. And then it's also the same for these high pressure systems. And that's important too, because this often can influence the steering current, which would move these storms whichever direction. So move this along. Here's wave number 1 here, closing in on the Antilles. And then here's our other tropical wave here. Notice how it starts to form up and it gets kicked out to sea already. Got caught by this ridge right here. Now it's going to steer it and just kind of loop it around, and we're not going to hear about it much. Do I think that one becomes Julia? Quite possibly. We'll look at the parameters as far as conditions over that area to see how quickly this may develop, but I do think this would be more likely to become Julia over this system right here. Nonetheless, we still have to watch it. But if you look here, you almost see 2 different big areas of concentrated low pressure centers. So again, this is what I mentioned before. There's a lot of model uncertainty on where this goes. The GEFS ensemble isn't really picking up on if this even becomes a storm as to which direction it goes. So if I were to pick which scenario would be more desirable, a little bit better on outcome, I would say this one that's more to the right. Reason I say that is obviously this storm will have less of a chance of developing. Yes, it would go over land, but it would be much weaker. Versus this, where it's hanging out over open waters and having time to potentially organize. So this goes out of picture, and there's still a lot of uncertainty beyond that point, of course, because we were getting 200 plus hours out at that point. And then, of course, with it being tropical season, we always have to watch for additional areas to pop up here. And while I'm not super certain on this because, you know, we're 294 hours out, that also is an interesting look as well. Not going to read too far into it. I'm just going to keep watch on it more so. But it's an interesting look nonetheless. Let's go ahead and go into the Caribbean, though, in the Western Atlantic, and get a little bit more of a better look at what the models are indicating for this storm. We're going to jump to about probably 120 hours out, and then get a good, and then we should be able to get a good idea of what happens next with this thing. This is just about where we left off, really. And you can see it. It's just going through Hispaniola. It's going through the Caribbean. But then things get really uncertain once we get to about 204 hours out. Of course, we're getting pretty far into the long range here. But you can clearly see there's a big area of big area in question here. High probability of a low pressure center in a lot of these areas, and even the number values kind of reflect that, because usually when you see these little higher numbers, that usually indicates a slightly higher probability of a low pressure center. But you can see some pretty high numbers around here as well, so a lot of uncertainty with this system and what it does. And then it just becomes this great big blob around Cuba. So hard to say what's going on here. There's a bunch of different outcomes that we have from this model, and it's just going about everywhere. And then the next system behind that looks like it might be doing the same thing. I'll be watching this over the coming days. I can do an outlook maybe every day if you guys want. Let me know in the comments or drop me a few likes. So I'm not trying to spam you guys, because I know we've been through one big storm already, and I don't want to overhype this either, because literally we just don't know. So that being said, let's go ahead and look at the euro. Try to gain some confidence. Try to see if I can gain any kind of confidence with this whatsoever. So here we are at current time. Get this set up properly. And the euro has this popping off a little bit later, but you can clearly see right here, this is our first tropical wave based on the numbers here, and then here's our second one. So it's going to start out being the same thing, but the euro kind of has it more hanging to the south here and over open waters for longer, which is a little bit more alarming. And then from that point, there's not really too much going on in the MDR region, which is all right with me. Maybe a couple pieces of energy may come off, but it's going to be a little bit slower because we are getting towards the end of hurricane season. May have this here, but more than likely this is going to get kicked out to sea. Or not. Oh, wait. It looks like it's starting to. But keep in mind that's over 300 hours out as well. So, a lot of interesting stuff going on, a lot of stuff to be watching as well. We're going to go ahead and move this over now to the Caribbean, the Western Atlantic. I clicked the wrong button. I meant to get 120. I clicked 12 like a silly fool. Alright, just skip this along a little bit faster. Okay, I might have gotten ahead of myself. So here's our tropical wave a little bit further along now, according to the euro. And probability seems a little bit higher that this is going to be hanging out over open waters instead of over the Caribbean islands, so to speak. Puerto Rico and Hispaniola were an area of interest on the GFS ensemble. But this looks like, according to the Euro, it either steamrolls this thing right into Mexico here, or this hangs out over Cuba. But no real certainty as to where it goes beyond really this point, because we're seeing the same thing with this as we saw with the GFS ensemble. Multiple high level means being exposed or being dispersed over several different locations. So can't really get up there. You can't really get a high confidence forecast out of it. So all we can do is just wait and see what this does next. One other thing that we're going to look at here before we close this video out is going to be the wind shear, particularly over the Caribbean and the Western Atlantic. Because we look for areas like this, these little TUTs, tropical upper level troughs here. Or this doesn't necessarily look like one. This is a really weird feature, actually. But alright, here's the GFS here. This is playing out our look for our main tropical wave of interest here. And while we're about, what, I'd say 130 hours out, wind shear over here is relatively light until we get over towards Cuba. For the most part, the wind shear, well, actually wind shear may be a little bit odd over here in the higher levels. We'll have to check the mid levels and other stuff, but I'm not going to run this video about 20 minutes just to do that for you guys. Or at least not today, maybe next time. But you can see that there is a little bit of wind shear here in the higher levels of the atmosphere, and it may lead to this storm not even forming at all. The operational hasn't even picked up on this yet, so like I said, there's not a lot of confidence yet. But with it being out this far, how can you have any? But clearly there is a decent amount of wind shear, especially later into the month around this region, which is potentially good news. If any storms try to form over here, they may die pretty quickly before really developing into anything major. Let's hope this holds. After what we've just went through, I'm pretty sure we don't want to deal with too much more, if at all. So that's what we have right now, really. Of course, I'll be keeping an eye on this throughout the week, and also keeping an eye on the cool down that's coming up. In fact, you can see that towards the middle of the week, towards the end of this model run, there's a pretty big trough, and it makes a big dip to the south here. Not a lot of certainty with that either, considering the fact that this is 384 hours out, several weeks from now, most likely. So, like I said, a lot of moving parts with the upcoming forecast on multiple fronts. We'll just have to wait and see how things go from there. But that's it for the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, drop me a like. Let me know in the comment section what you would want me to do as far as covering this next tropical wave, and I'll get right on that. Also have some other interesting stuff being worked on this channel soon. Just keep an eye out towards early December. I might have something pretty cool for you guys in store. But anyway, enough rambling. This has been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. I hope you guys have a good rest of the weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.